to Deep Sleep Stories. Thank you to everyone who's been listening. If these stories help you relax or fall asleep, a short review, comment, or sharing the podcast with someone who might benefit is a simple and meaningful way to support the show so that we may continue to offer it for free. Now, take a slow, gentle breath and let's begin tonight's story.
Welcome to Deep Sleep Stories. Tonight you'll be carried to a fern-covered cottage where a small fireplace keeps the darkness gentle and a quiet mystery waits in the soft glow of embers. Settle yourself in, just as you are, with nothing to solve and nowhere to go. Let your shoulders sink, as if they're remembering how to rest. Let your jaw loosen. Let your hands soften, the fingers uncurling like leaves at dusk. If it feels comfortable, allow your eyelids to be heavy, as though they've been listening for this moment all day. Take a slow breath in and let it ease out. Another breath in, and this time exhale, as if you're setting down a bag you didn't realize you'd been holding. And one more, quiet and steady, letting the air come and go like a tide that never hurries. Imagine the room you're in growing warmer, even if only in your mind. A calm warmth, like a blanket laid fresh from sunlit linen. Let the sounds around you become part of a wider hush. Any thoughts that arrive can drift by like small clouds. You don't need to chase them. You don't need to push them away. Simply notice them and let them move on. Now, in your imagination, you find yourself at the edge of a forest in the late evening. The light is soft, the color of honey stirred into tea. Ferns and moss spread across the ground in green layers, thick and velvety, holding the day's coolness like a secret. You can almost smell it, the clean, damp scent of leaf and soil, the faint sweetness of bark and sap. With each breath, your body feels a little more supported, a little more settled, and with each quiet moment, the forest welcomes you in. A narrow path appears, not sharp or bright, but gently suggested, an opening between trunks and fronds, a place where the ground seems to guide your feet without asking for effort. You don't need to walk quickly. You don't even need to decide anything. The path is there, and you are simply drifting along it, carried by an unspoken kindness in the air. As you move, you notice how peaceful everything is. The ferns look like 1,000 small hands, open and calm. The trees stand like patient guardians. Somewhere far away, a small owl offers a single note, then goes quiet again, as if it only wanted to remind the world that night has begun. You breathe in, and your lungs fill with the cool sweetness of the forest. You breathe out, and your mind grows quieter. Ahead through the fronds, there is a hint of amber light. Not bright, not demanding, just a steady glow like a lantern behind a curtain. The air changes slightly as you draw closer, becoming warmer, carrying a faint scent of wood smoke, soft and comforting, like a memory of safe places. And now, without any rush, the story begins to drift away from you just a little, becoming easier to watch than to do. In a gentle hollow among the ferns, where the ground dipped as if the earth itself had decided to rest, there stood a cottage. It was small and thoughtful, built of stone and wood, that looked as though it had grown there rather than been placed. Ferns climbed the low walls in patient spirals. Moss softened the edges of the roof. A round window blinked with candlelight like a sleepy eye. This was Fern Cottage, and it had been standing in that hollow for as long as anyone could remember, perhaps longer than remembering itself. The forest had made room for it, and the cottage had returned the favor by being kind. Birds nested under the eaves. Mice warmed themselves near the hearth in winter. The wind always seemed gentler when it passed over the roof. Inside the cottage, there was a fireplace that did not pretend to be grand. It was modest, built from smooth river stones, each one rounded by time. The mantel above it was a single slab of pale wood, worn satin soft by years of hands, resting there, and quiet objects being placed and moved. And within that fireplace lived a fire that behaved like a companion. It crackled when spoken to. It glowed when listened to. It never flared in anger, and it never went out of spite. If it dwindled, it did so politely, shrinking into embers the way a conversation fades into comfortable silence. On this evening, the cottage had a visitor, not the kind who arrived with bags and plans, but the kind who arrived with the day still clinging to their shoulders, seeking nothing more than to be held by warmth. Her name was Elowen, and she moved like someone who had learned to be gentle with herself. She stepped through the cottage door and paused, letting the warmth greet her. The air inside was honeyed by firelight, and the shadows were soft-edged, as if they had no interest in startling anyone. Elowen set a small bundle on the table, fresh kindling gathered from beneath the shelter of a fallen log, and a few sprigs of rosemary whose scent lingered on her fingertips. She pulled her cloak from her shoulders and hung it on a hook, where it settled with a faint sigh. The cottage responded in tiny ways. The kettle on the hearth made a quiet, friendly sound. The wooden floor creaked as if stretching. The fire brightened, not sharply, but with the slow delight of recognition. Elowen sat on the hearth rug, close enough to feel the warmth, but not so close that it demanded anything from her. She held her hands out, palms toward the glow, and watched the light paint them gold. Her fingers looked like they belonged to a storybook, outlined in soft flame. For a while she did nothing at all. That was part of what Fern Cottage offered. Permission. Permission to stop. Permission to let the mind loosen its grip. Permission to breathe and simply be. Outside, the forest shifted deeper into night. The last light faded from the sky, leaving only the quiet sheen of moon behind thin cloud. Dew began to settle on leaves. Somewhere in the hollow, a stream whispered as it slipped over stones, an endless, soothing sound that never needed attention. Inside, Elowen listened to the fire. She had heard rumors about this fireplace, gentle rumors passed from traveler to traveler in voices lowered as if telling a lullaby. They said the fire could show you things, but not in a way that demanded understanding, not like a riddle or like a dream that knows how to soothe. Elowen was not here to seek answers. She was here because the day had been long and crowded, full of small decisions and quick movements. She was here because she wanted her thoughts to slow down enough to settle. She wanted to feel herself, returning to herself. She reached for a small tin on the mantel and opened it. Inside were dried herbs, lavender, chamomile, a bit of thyme. She sprinkled a pinch into a little bowl near the fire, and the warmth lifted the scent into the air. It drifted through the room like a gentle spell. The fire crackled softly, as if pleased. Elowen poured water into the kettle and set it closer to the heat. Then she stood and wandered the cottage, not searching, simply moving. Fern Cottage had one main room with a low ceiling and beams darkened by time. Lanterns hung like sleeping moons. A shelf held mugs in mismatched shapes, each with a comfortable chip or glazed drip that made it feel loved rather than flawed. A small table sat near the window, where a book lay open face down, keeping its place with a pressed fern. In the corner, a narrow staircase curved up to a loft, where a bed waited beneath quilts. The quilts were patched in greens and soft browns, like a map of the forest itself. Pillows rested there like gentle clouds. Elowen paused at the foot of the stairs and looked up, feeling the pull of rest. But she was not ready yet. Not quite. There was something about the fireplace tonight, something that seemed to invite her to stay a little longer in the glow, to let the warmth do its slow work. She returned to the hearth as the kettle began to sing. The sound was not sharp. It was a small, airy whistle, like a distant bird calling in a dream. Elowen poured hot water into a mug and watched the steam rise. She held it close, letting the warmth touch her face. She took a sip, and the tea tasted like meadow and calm, like sunlight filtered through leaves. She settled again on the rug, and this time her eyelids drooped. The firelight danced behind them even when her eyes were half closed. Her breath became deeper, slower, as if it had been waiting all day to find this rhythm. The fire did something then, something so subtle, she might have missed it if she'd been in a hurry. The flames leaned inward, gathering themselves. The embers brightened. The crackling shifted into a steadier, softer cadence, like a language spoken very quietly. Elowen watched the flames and let her mind become loose and floaty, like a boat untied from its dock. Within the fireplace, shapes began to appear, not sharp images, not scenes that demanded focus, more like impressions, slow and warm. The way you might see pictures in clouds, only these clouds were made of ember glow and drifting smoke. She saw a fern unfurling, the curled tip slowly opening into a delicate green fan. She saw a trail through mist, moonlight laying silver across stones. She saw a cottage door swinging closed, not with finality, but with comfort, as if the world outside could wait. Elowen's shoulders dropped lower. Her grip on the mug softened. Her thoughts, which had been busy and buzzing, began to settle like leaves drifting down to the forest floor. The fire offered another image. This time it was a memory that did not belong to her, and yet it felt familiar. A long time ago, when Fern Cottage was newly built, there had been someone else who came to this hearth, a caretaker perhaps, or a wanderer who decided to stay. The forest had been wilder then, the trees thicker, the path less certain. The nights had been darker, in a way that made the stars feel closer. That person, soft-eyed, quiet-footed, had placed the first log in the fireplace and lit it with a single spark. The fire had taken hold slowly, as if testing the air. Then it had warmed the stones, it had warmed the room, it had warmed the spirit of the cottage itself. And from that first night onward, the fireplace had learned what it meant to comfort. As Elowen watched, the fire seemed to remember along with her. The flames leaned and swayed, patient and steady. The cottage felt fuller, as if time itself had wrapped another quilt around the room. Outside, the forest listened. Night creatures moved through the ferns with delicate care. A fox stepped lightly over roots, pausing to sniff the air. A small hare sat near a clump of moss, ears turning toward the cottage as if hearing the warmth through the walls. Even the trees seemed to hush, their branches barely stirring. Fern Cottage had a way of making the world gentler. Elowen's mug was nearly empty now, the tea only a warm trace. She set it aside and leaned back against the side of the hearth. The stones were warm through her clothing, a slow heat that sank into her muscles and told them they could let go. The fire shifted again, offering something that felt like an invitation. It was not an invitation to go anywhere far. It was an invitation to go inward, to drift through a story that required no effort. In the flame, Elowen saw a small doorway in the forest, an arch of woven branches and ferns glowing faintly. She did not wonder if it was real. She did not question. She simply watched, and her breathing stayed slow. In the archway, a light appeared, the same amber warmth as the hearth. And in that light, there was a sense of kindness waiting, a place that did not ask her to be anything other than tired and human. Elowen blinked slowly, and the image softened into smoke. The archway became a ripple of ember light, then faded entirely. The fireplace had given what it wanted to give, and now it returned to its quiet work of simply being fire. The room was very still, the kind of stillness that feels like safety. Elowen rose with unhurried movements. She rinsed her mug and placed it on the shelf. She banked the fire with practiced care, nudging a log so it would last through the night, letting the flames settle into a calm, steady glow. The fire responded with a soft crackle, like a small, approving murmur. Then she climbed the stairs to the loft. Each step was a gentle creak, as if the cottage was speaking in sleepy syllables. Upstairs, the bed waited like a nest. The quilts were thick and inviting, layered in greens, that reminded her of ferns and quiet hills. Elowen slipped beneath them, and the warmth held her immediately. She lay on her side, facing the small window. Through it, she could see the forest in moonlight, soft shapes, dark and calm. The branches outside swayed just a little, not in wind, but in the slow movement of night itself. Below, the fireplace continued to glow. Its light climbed the walls in gentle waves, reaching up to the loft like a slow tide of gold. It painted the ceiling beams with warmth. It made the shadows kind. Elowen's eyes were heavy, but her mind was peaceful. She listened to the sounds of the cottage settling, wood cooling and warming, the faint pop of a log shifting, the whisper of the stream outside. And then she noticed something else, something so subtle it felt like imagination. A soft, melodic sound, like a lullaby played on air. It came from the fireplace below, as if the fire had learned to hum. Elowen didn't try to understand it. She didn't sit up. She simply let it wash over her, like warm water over tired feet. In that humming, there were no words, only comfort, only the sense that the night was holding her gently, rocking her toward sleep. The forest outside seemed to join in. The leaves rustled in a slow rhythm. The stream whispered a steady line beneath it all. Even the distant owl sounded softer now, as if singing rather than calling. Elowen's breath became deeper still. Her thoughts drifted apart, losing their sharp edges. The day loosened its hold on her. In the quiet, the fireplace offered one last gift. Not an image this time, but a feeling. A feeling of being sheltered, of being safe, of being allowed to rest without earning it. The cottage, the forest, the fire. They were all part of the same gentle spell. As Elowen's eyelids finally closed, the loft grew dimmer, the firelight below turning into a soft blur. The humming faded into the natural music of night. The quilts held her like a promise. And somewhere in the hearth, the embers glowed on, slow and steady, like a heart that knows how to keep watch without waking anyone. Time became soft. The minutes stretched and melted. The world narrowed to warmth and breath. The forest hollow cradled the cottage. The cottage cradled the fire cradled the quiet. Elowen slept, and the night deepened around her, gentle as fern fronds brushing over stone. The wind down comes now slowly, like a lantern being dimmed. The sounds grow simpler, a faint crackle, a quiet hush, a steady breath in the dark. The body feels heavier. The mind feels farther away. Everything is settling. The fireplace holds its glow. The cottage holds its warmth. The forest holds its peace. And you can simply drift and drift and drift. Good night, dear traveler. Sleep well.